Hello everyone, my name is Greg Bennett and I'm holding the OM8CE, and this is one of the beautiful models you'll find in the Continental series in the Greg Bennett guitar line. I'm going to take you through the features. We'll just start right up at the headstock and work our way towards the end of the body. The headstock for most brands is part of their identity, you know, their style, and we have this offset headstock that we're really proud of. And visually it's great, but there's also some tremendous mechanical or engineering benefits that you can pull out of a headstock based on the way you design it. And you'll notice that all of our headstocks are a bit smaller, and what this does is by reducing the resonant surface of the headstock, you drag less energy off the string. And you have to remember, especially with an acoustic, that anything that is moving or resonating is getting that energy off the string. So it's nice to be able, just by the size of this thing, to improve your attack and sustain. And anybody who finger picks, you know, you're looking for that sustain. You'll also notice that the machine heads, the tuners, are configured so that they converge up at the end of the headstock rather than flaring. And what that does is it creates a straight or a straighter string path through the nut. And anybody who's been tuning and hears that little ping or that snag when you're trying to tune so that the tuning then jumps one way or the other, you'll appreciate this because you get a nice, easy, smooth flow through the nut. We also use a white graphite type material, which is just proven to be really wonderful because the tone of it is great. It doesn't produce a harsh tone, but it does improve sustain. And it's almost a bit self-lubricating, so that string really flows through that slot beautifully. You'll also notice that we angle that headstock back or cock it back, and there's a method to that madness because the more angle you create with the headstock, the more angle you create with the string, and that angle increases the bearing pressure at that point of contact where the string meets the nut. And the cool thing about that is that the greater that contact, the less energy from the string can pass over it. So just simply by angling the headstock back, we pick up string performance benefits. It's also a bit, because it's smaller, it's a bit lighter, and that's just comfortable because anybody who's ever played on stage knows that holding up that neck all night is not the most fun. We have a really great relationship with the folks at Grover. We just love their machine heads, and Grover was one of the very first companies to make a really super refined gear. It's about a 13-to-1 ratio, and what that does is as you're tuning, you sort of very gently come up on that note. You're not having to sweep past it and go back and forth, so you get really accurate tuning. The other thing that's really nice about them is the button, the part you hold to tune. It's got a nice soft feel in your hand, and that also is just, I think, really nice. Now, coming up to the neck, we use a material called NATO, which is sort of like a mahogany, and it's a great wood for necks because you get a wonderful strength because, think about it, you have a lot of string pressure pulling at that neck, so there's tremendous strength to it, but it's a tone wood, and it gives you a nice warmth, a nice musical sound. It doesn't, as you get into harder and harder woods, you get into more of a brittle, sort of an edgy sound. So it really makes the tone nice, and especially on an acoustic, you want to capture that warmth. The fingerboards are bound, and that allows us to put a little bit of a roll, a little softer edge on the fingerboard. Finger pickers will love that because, you know, your thumb is always wrapping over the top, and it just feels real soft in your hand, really comfortable. We use rosewood for the fingerboard. This is just a wonderful wood for this application because it's, first off, it's exposed to the elements, and the reason for that is that from time to time you'll want to have a little bit of fret work done, especially if you do a lot of folk or finger picking. You kind of gravitate in this area, and you have to keep your frets leveled. So it's great for that because of the oiliness. It's also really dense. It's a hard material, and what that means is when you hit a note, the fingerboard is not dragging energy off the string. So, and plus, it just adds to the structural strength of the neck. This particular guitar, we use slotted squares. Some people refer to them as snowflakes, but it's a nice vintage kind of look. It's very traditional, very, very clean. As you follow down to the heel, We use what's sometimes referred to as a French heel. It's a broad connection. It makes a great stable contact point for the neck and the body. There's a block in here that this sort of affixes to. But the more stable that is, the more rigid that contact, again, the less likely that neck is going to act like a shock absorber and pull that energy off the string. As you continue all the way down to the bridge and the saddle, we have a compensated saddle, which just helps your tuning a bit, and a rosewood bridge. We insist that we have a lot of neck angle to the body, and that always, what that does is by cocking the neck back, you increase the string angle over the saddle. I don't know if you can capture that there. And that does the same thing as angling the headstock back. The more angle over the saddle, the greater the bearing pressure, the hotter the string. And anybody who's doing single string lead, like bluegrass or fingerstyle, will just love that, because it's that little simple mechanical advantage just gives you so much definition and sustain. It's really a nice thing to have. The top of this guitar, and I have to emphasize when we talk about the top, this is probably the most important element of the instrument when you consider how it performs, because this top is sort of performs the same way as a speaker cone does in a speaker cabinet. This is the part of the guitar that is pushing the sound, that's pushing the air. The sound hole literally acts like a port. So the more flexible that top is, it's a solid cedar top in this case, the greater efficiency, the quicker the guitar responds. Now, as I mentioned, this is cedar, and cedar is a bit softer wood than spruce, and the tone is sort of weighted towards the low mids, which is really, really pretty. I mean, it's a more delicate, softer sound, very, very musical. It doesn't have quite the primary high end of spruce, but it has this beautiful harmonic content that almost sort of rains down on it. If you, to give you an example, the James Taylor sound, where he plays really delicately. The top, because it's softer, responds to that lighter touch. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful sound. So, solid cedar top. This body on the OM8CE is a bit smaller, and the idea for that, or the idea with that, is to enhance the articulation, the clarity. The smaller body doesn't give you quite as much bass, but what you pick up in control and just clarity is really, really tremendous. So, cedar top. We also the sound hole has the abalone type inlay, and we do the same thing on the edge, which just gives the guitar a nice sort of vintage high-end look. Sides and back are made out of rosewood, and rosewood, as we were discussing with the fingerboards, is a very dense, hard wood, and it just throws off tons and tons of bass. So, especially with this little bit smaller body, when you combine it with rosewood, you pick up all this huskiness and low-end power. It also has a beautiful brightness to it, but the bass is so prevalent that most people forget that. So it just blends beautifully with the solid cedar top. The electronics in this guitar are by Fishman, and we've really been thrilled with our relationships with some of our component suppliers. Fishman has just always been at the forefront of the most innovative acoustic electronics, and this particular guitar has a 4-band graphic EQ, which means you can cut or boost your frequencies in bass, mids, primary trebles, and then brilliance. And the brilliance is a very cool part of this, because that's the part that it encompasses harmonics and that jangly high-end sound. Or if you're one of those players that just loves the sound of the pick sort of glancing on the strings, it's almost a little bit of a percussive thing. Every country music record, you hear that. So that gives you control over that. The mid-range is going to be critical to anybody sort of trying to capture your own sort of signature sound. If you boost that, you're going to get a much more lush or thicker mid-range, obviously. And as you pull that down, it cleans things up. So the treble and the bass sort of come out and become a little bit more prominent. And just a wonderful guitar if you're looking for clarity, definition, control, whether you're in the studio or on stage. So this is the OM8CE Continental, and check it out. We just covered the various features and benefits of this OM8CE. Now I think it's time that we plug it in and show you what it's capable of.